Well, got myself set up to do some dye work. And see if you can see this here. I've got my dye in a clamp because I don't want to knock that over. And yeah, it's my own home mix of dye. Home mixed dye? Home mixed color of, anyway, I mixed it. And we're going to start with this one. Now to dye these, I'm using a dauber. And basically the way I do it is I just make swirlies all over the whole thing. Using lots of dye. And then I scratch my ear. No. I do straight lines. Across it. Once again, making sure to use lots of dye. And making sure I get everywhere on it. We do it one more time just to be absolutely positive. The dye is going to soak into the leather, so it will get splotchy as it dries. And you'll be thinking, oh man, that looks awful, I need to touch that up. But don't do it. Just leave it set, and that side's done. Now we'll go ahead and do the inside of this one. But I don't have to go all the way out to the edge. Well, I will cover the edge. Well, you know what? Yes, I do. Because after I cut the slots, I want it all dyed inside anyway. So I'll just go ahead and do it the same way. Do swirlies and then lines and yeah. Make sure I get a lot on the inside part here. Whoopsie. And since dye doesn't get sticky as it's drying, you can flip it over and do the other side while it's wet. There's no particular rhyme or reason for why I do the inside first or the outside first or anything. The idea is just to get dye all over it, but you want to keep it reasonably even. Now once I cut the slots, once I get this glued together and I cut the slots, I will have to redo those, touch them up a bit, just to make sure they come out evenly. Okay. Do that edge there. And that edge there. And once these edges dry, well, I'm going to leave the whole thing to dry, maybe a day, maybe two, and then go ahead and burnish those edges. And we'll go over how I do that. Or not, depends on whether or not I turn the camera on. Sometimes though, I just get to working on stuff. Get the inside of this piece, can you see that? Do my swirlies. Okay, that should do it. And you can see how it's starting to get kind of splotchy. But as that dries, it'll smooth out some. So we're going to leave these sit until they dry. And then it's back to work on them. See you in a little bit.
Aww.
Well, they're all dry now. And you can see the way the color evened out on them. Now, one thing is I already buffed it, but after it dries, you're going to have some, at least I have some excess dye sitting on the surface, and you just take a cloth and buff that off of there. And do that on both sides. Now the next step I'm going to have to do is to punch stitch holes across the top and the bottom of both pieces and stitch the liner to the outside piece. And then we can go ahead, glue these together, sand it, bevel it, sand it. Let's see, we're going to sand it, and then we're going to mark where the stitch lines will go, and then we're going to punch the stitch holes, and then we're going to bevel it, and then we might burnish it, or we might stitch it and then burnish it, depending on how it looks. Anyway, and you can see how the basket weave came out on there. That looks pretty good. And once I get the final top coat on that and get it all buffed out, it'll be nice and pretty. Okay, we'll see you in the next video when we start punching these stitch holes.